Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm joined by herbalist Brighid Doherty. Welcome to the show, Brighid.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to be here.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and the flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Thanks for joining me. It's fun to turn the tables a little bit because you interviewed me on your podcast called the Healthy Herb Podcast, and we'll talk a bit about that more later on. But first, let's get to know Brighid a little bit more. So, Brighid, how did you get into this whole herbal thing?
It's funny. I grew up in the hills of Vermont in Johnson area and was always surrounded by nature, and my mom was an avid gardener. So I remember just really vibing with the plants. And I just, loved to kind of make potpourris and potions as a young kid. And then when I was in high school, I fell in with a friend who really liked herbs. And I was like, oh yeah, herbs are cool. And I remember just wanting to harvest and dry things, even though I didn't really know what I was doing, like harvesting lilacs because they smelled so good, and then drying them and they crinkled up and turned brown. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Okay. And then when I went to college, I started at the University of New Hampshire and started hanging out with some real hippies then, 1990s hippies.
Sure. I remember them.
Deadheads, fish heads. And I just remember just being really intrigued by these people that had cool bags of herbs and were smoking herbal blends, and was just, really curious. And I got my first herb book, which was by Deb Sewell. And I had like a chronic sore throat. It was strep throat. It was like my first kind of illness. And when I was in college, I was on my own. And so I went to the medical center and they gave me antibiotics, and then it came right back. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to try herbs. And I don't remember exactly what I did. All I remember is burdock. Like I did something with burdock. I must've made a tea, or I don't know what it was, but it went away and it never came back. And I was like, oh my gosh, herbs work. This is so cool. And so I just kind of started delving in at that point. And I remember I have this like one memory in my mind of, this acquaintance being like, oh, I'm going to, be an herbalist when I grow up, essentially. And I was like, oh my God, like that's a thing. Like I totally want to be an herbalist. I didn't even know that was a thing, but I know that's what I want to do and be. So from then on, it was just kind of a lifelong quest of gaining more and more information and connecting with the plants. And I remember in college, I started with a good friend of mine. We started an organization on campus. We had been with the Cannabis Coalition, and then that kind of fell apart. And we were like, well, we'll start our own and we'll call it HEMP, Humans for the Empowerment of Mother Nature's Plants.
Awesome.
And of course, I was like, yeah, all plants are cool. So then we had our first meeting. And of course, with the name like hemp, we had all these kids come to the meeting, and we maybe talked about our organization a little bit in hemp, but I was like, I of course went on this like diatribe on all about burdock. And I was like, let's talk about burdock and all of its medicinal properties and how to forage it. And then of course our next meeting, hardly anyone came, but I don't know. That was kind of the start of my wanting to teach and talk about herbs, and it carried on from there.
The rest is history. So at any point, did you decide to go to, say, some more like an herb school, or who have been some of your mentors along the way?
Yeah. So from there, I was at the University of New Hampshire, and I transferred out to Evergreen State College because I was in marine biology, but I realized I wanted to study horticulture or sustainable agriculture. And so I had some friends who I had known had been to Evergreen and that they had a good program out there. So I moved out west.
Wow.
And when I was at Evergreen, I met KP Khalsa, Kartapurk Singh Khalsa, and he was promoting he had like a 9-month herbalist, quote unquote, certification program, a clinical herbalist program. And so that was my first formal studying that I did, was with him. And it was very formal. It was at the Puget Sound Community College. It was all in like nighttime classroom classes, book study. We had like a whole bunch of textbooks, and we had to study 200 herbs and learn about all the body parts and pathology. And it was very heady. We never actually went outside. We never really connected with any plants, which I thought was really, looking back on it, I think it's interesting, but I was already kind of in that mindset with being in college. So it seemed like that would be the way to learn about herbalism, because that's how I was learning about everything at that point. I went back to New Hampshire after I graduated college. I went back to the UNH area, Portsmouth area of New Hampshire, and I got a job at a natural pharmacy, the Herbal Path, which was all supplements.
Yeah, I just want to say the owner of the Herbal Path just emailed me the other day. And he
really?
Said, he said he's a pharmacist, but he has like a natural food store, like a supplement store, and he was just wondering how we could collaborate. And so that's just really interesting that you actually, so you worked there?
I did. Yeah.
Wow,
I worked there. I was the manager of the store. I mean, I think that was around 2000 when I started working there, and I worked there for maybe, and it was right when he had just opened a year or two prior.
Wow.
And I was assistant manager and a resident herbalist. And I started of course, like an educational series, a lecture series there where I taught. And that was also very interesting because it was it was like a lot of supplement, it was a store that was a lot of supplements and jars and bottles and standardized extracts. I mean, we did have a bulk herb section, but again, it was not very hands-on or at one with the plants in nature. Sure. It was still in that really different realm. Although I also was working with a farm. Like when I was at Evergreen, I actually interned on an herb farm out there. And so I was learning about growing herbs and farming herbs. And then I was also working with a farmer in New Hampshire and growing herbs with him. And so that was always kind of a passion of mine, was growing the plants too. But that was always kind of separate from the herbalist aspect. It was very divided in my mind and in my world at that time.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I had actually gone back and worked with him a little bit after too, at the Herbal Path. Years later. But then I kind of ended up, I feel like because it was so not connected with the earth and nature, that I almost got like disenchanted with herbalism in general, because I felt like it was still very using herbs as drugs and supplements as drugs. And it wasn't really the paradigm shift that I really was craving or wanted or needed in the herbal realm. And so I moved to where I live now, Deer Isle, Maine, which is a bridged island in Down East Maine, or the very beginning of Down East Maine. Real Down Easters probably don't consider it Down East, but and I ended up, gardening and painting houses and just kind of living my life. And herbs were always a passion, but they never were, I actually did some teaching here about herbs, but it just kind of, my life, it wasn't dominant in my life. And I actually, as I was painting houses for a job, I of course started listening to podcasts. And this was when podcasts were just kind of becoming a thing, I feel like. And I started listening to Susan Weed's podcast. And I'd known of Susan Weed. I had her books. I'd been to conferences where she talked, and I was always like, whoa, I can't even hear what this woman is saying right now, because it contradicts everything that I have been taught and that I have learned about herbalism. And it's too contradictory. And then I finally got to a point where I was able to be removed from everything that I had learned from herbalism, and I was able to actually hear what she was saying and kind of the voice of the wise woman tradition.
Mm.
And I was ready for that paradigm shift at that point. And everything that she taught, like, so challenged everything that I had believed in a lot of ways. And that's what I needed. And so she became a mentor of mine, and she still is my, definitely my main mentor at this point.
Did you go study with her in New York, or primarily was it through like the radio show?
I did some correspondence course studying with her. So I talked with her on the phone a lot, and did some work of classes kind of through a correspondence course.
Gotcha.
And I did go to Woodstock for one weekend, and did one, weekend workshop there, where when I was pregnant, I was like, okay, I gotta do something, because I'm probably not going to have an opportunity for a while, soon to be mom, to travel and do my own thing. So I took that opportunity, and that was pretty intense, but even just for a weekend was quite intense. But it was nice that I got, because I really wanted that in-person experience too. But since then, I'm still in course with her and still talk with her on the phone when I have questions or need some mentoring in all realms of life, really.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into it later, but I know Susan, of course, spearheaded a lot of the nourishing herbal infusion work that you do. I guess I'm guessing here, but we'll get into that later. But I also want to mention KP Kalsa. Amanda's actually editing my interview with him right now. We did an in-person interview with KP when we were still in Eugene, and I love that guy. I interviewed an herbalist named Dana Hutchinson, and she used this term called armchair herbalist. And these are herbalists that are more like, say, on like the pharmacy side. Have you heard this term before?
I've always heard of it, or thinking of people that like kind of read book, read books, a lot of books about the armchair herbalist. But
it's so cool that you ended up having, this paradigm shift where you did, you were able to interconnect the nature healing aspect and herbalism together. And I feel like that really just changed your trajectory in general. So that's really neat that you finally had that experience, with Susan and whatnot. But why don't we shift gears a little bit and talk about this new project it looks like you're involved in? I saw this on your Instagram page, the Botanical Anthology. So can you tell us what the Botanical Anthology is and what is your involvement with it?
Yeah, the Botanical Anthology is this really lovely publication. It comes out, seasonally, 4 times a year. I think that they've just, with this recent summer's edition, makes 1 year that they've been in publication. And they just started actually making like physical copies that you can get via Amazon or I think you can get them through their website. So they are, it's the Plant Wonder Collective and Harmony O'Loughlin that put it all together. And the Plant Wonder Collective is an organization, or like kind of a group of plant-minded people, not necessarily all herbalists. Some are crafters, chefs, and they all have a love of plants. And they all focus every month on one plant, and then kind of talk all different ways that they work with it through Instagram, just as a way of promoting themselves and having a community around herbs on Instagram. And then from that was born the Botanical Anthology. And it still is a digital publication, seasonal. And every issue has maybe up to 40 different contributors, all presenting articles and recipes that are seasonally based and all based around plants. So everything from ritual and ceremony to in the kitchen to in the apothecary, foraging, harvesting, growing, plant dyes, art, crafts, working with children. I mean, it's really in depth and a lovely compilation. I think we're still trying to figure out the best way to describe it. I mean, I think anthology is a great way to describe it. It's, it's kind of a magazine, it's kind of a journal, it's kind of a book, it's all things wrapped together, but definitely a compilation. And this would be the third issue, right? The third issue that I've written an article for, and now we are just starting in on autumn's issue as well.
Are you a part of that collective that you were talking about?
I'm actually not a part of the collective. I'm not. You have to be really into working with Instagram a lot, and I'm just not at that point fully committed time-wise.
Yeah.
I haven't even really been able to keep with my own Instagram account right now, so I couldn't make that commitment. But I guess Harmony found me through Instagram, I believe. She was looking for someone in the winter edition to write an article about like a herbal cocktail, holiday cocktail. Or maybe she found me on YouTube. I don't remember where, but she found me and asked me to write an article kind of last minute. And I was like, sure.
Well, I did want to give you props on your Instagram page. I actually think you do a really nice job, and you're all about using songs and whatnot. And I was just perusing your Instagram before this interview to see what's going on with you and everything. So, dear listener, if you want to give Brighid a follow, you can follow her on Instagram. I want to say that's at Solidago Herb School. Is that right?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I saw that you in the most recent issue you wrote about linden. Which might be a nice transition to talk about infusions. So just to let you know, dear listener, Brighid Doherty created, I want to say, a 3-hour and 15-minute module for us on our Art of Frugal Nutrition course. And this is all about infusions, like the why of infusions, the frugality of infusions. And then I want to say you cover like 10 plants or something like that. And in depth, like this is probably the most in-depth. This is the most in-depth course I've seen on infusions, let alone I'm sure Brighid's got a bunch of courses and material on that on her website as well. So I guess why don't we start with, I would like to get to linden and maybe a couple other infusions where you could kind of briefly teach the audience about these different nourishing herbal infusions. But so why do you love infusions so much, Brighid?
Oh, I love infusions so much because they're a great way to work with herbs on a daily basis, even if you're not sick, and need healing or medicine. It's a really great way to connect with individual plants really deeply, I feel like, because I really promote using a nourishing herbal infusion one herb at a time, because then you can really get to know that one plant. I am a simpler in general. I really just like to work with one plant per remedy. I might work with multiple plants in a day or for a reason, but I really like to keep things simple because then you can really build an intimacy with the plants. I also really like the fact that they are so nutrient rich. It's really like, this word is so kind of trendy, but it really is a superfood, where it's really just concentrated nutrition. And it's the herbs that are worked with for nourishing herbal infusions are food-like herbs. They're not necessarily like really medicinal herbs, although again, food is medicine, right? So,
Sure.
But they're not stimulants or sedatives. They tend to just nourish and build health. And they're tend to be really high in minerals and vitamins and protein. So it's a really easy way to get nutrition and in a natural and broad straight. It's like way better than a multivitamin would be, a supplement form, because you're only getting one tiny component of each mineral in a multivitamin. You might get calcium malate or something, or calcium citrate, but you're not going to get all of the different calciums in a matrix connected with all the protein and everything else in this. Yeah, I think matrix is the best way of describing it, that's how our body is meant to recognize minerals and vitamins and utilize them and absorb them. So I think it's really the best way to get the deepest nutrition possible in the easiest way. They're pre-digested for you. We've already extracted the nutrition from the plant. You don't have to rely on your gut and your microbiome to do that.
Yeah, I want to say it is the wise woman tradition where I probably learned doing the simpler. Is that what you call it? Like the simpler's method, like one herb at a time.
Yeah.
I want to say I took a class from John Gallagher's learningherbs.com or Herb Mentor, and Susan Weed taught all about it and strongly emphasized doing one herb at a time. And I still do it that way to this day. Right now, it looks a little light compared to usual, but I'm drinking a nettle infusion, which I'm more on I don't know, I feel like nettle's a little too stimulating, but I do feel like I need a little extra pep in my step today. So, but I was talking about linden earlier. You wrote an article recently about linden in the Botanical Anthology. And I'm particularly fond of this plant. I was hoping you could talk about maybe linden in general, but also the linden infusion as well.
Yeah, linden it's a tree that's common. There's a variety of species of linden, and they can all be used or worked with interchangeably. And it's the blossom that we work with the most, although if you're harvesting it, you can work with the leaves as well. And as linden for the infusion is interesting because it's not necessarily super high in vitamins and minerals, but it is really high in anti-inflammatory components, which Susan Weed originally kind of added it to her top 5 herbs for nourishing herbal infusions, more for the fact that it is a really excellent anti-inflammatory or inflammation modulator. Because so much of today's disease or diseases are based in chronic inflammation, and definitely are increased by inflammation. So it's also very soothing. It has a lot of mucilage in it. It's very demulcent, so very soothing to mucous membranes as well. And any irritations in like the gut lining, or, I feel like we hear so much about people who have really hard time digesting food. And linden also is great at just soothing the whole digestive tract and helping to heal and restore the really important mucous membrane that lines our whole digestive tract as well. I do most of the nourishing herbal or all of the nourishing herbal infusions. We weigh out 1 ounce of the plant material, which is a lot of plant material. It's not a handful. It's way more than that. It's not a cup. It's by weight an ounce. And if you were to do that with linden, it can get really thick and gloppy, which I love if I have a sore throat, tonsillitis. It has been my savior. If you really need a lot of mucilage, an ounce of linden infusion is great, of linden in the infusion. But for everyday use or weekly use, a half ounce. This is one herb that we can just weigh out a half ounce of, especially if it's cut and sifted. Then it produces a lot more mucilage versus I like to buy it whole, getting the whole blossom if possible.
Where do you buy that whole blossom from?
Frontier.
Oh, okay. They sell the whole dried blossom. That's awesome. Yeah. When I worked at Mountain Rose Herbs, I want to say it was primarily cut and sifted, and I could only imagine a whole ounce of linden would be, because it's so fluffy, or at least, it probably would take almost the whole quart jar. If I'm recalling correctly, linden used to be in the Malvaceae, which is like the marshmallow plant family. I don't think it is anymore. I think it's in the Tiliaceae, but
I think that's reversed, actually.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah, good. All right.
It used to be the Tiliaceae family. It had its own family.
Yeah.
And for some reason, they've recently put it in the Malvaceae family, which I find odd. I mean, I find it makes sense because of all the mucilage and very demulcent, but, usually families are determined by flowers. They have to have the same type of flower.
Right.
And it's hard to imagine, and maybe it does if you look really closely at the Malva family plants and the linden flower, because they're like the Malva plants have that hibiscus, that classic, pistil and stamen hibiscus look to them.
Yeah, to me, the linden flowers look nothing like that, but they're very unique.
I don't know. They say, oh, well, learn the botanical names because it's, universal. And but now they're always changing botanical names. I'm like, why? I love Cimicifuga. Why do we have to change it?
So I was interviewing Krista Sinadinas last week, and she wrote The Essential Guide to Western Botanical Medicine. And she said it took her 9 years to write, right? And so she said she was thankful that in the end she organized the 149 herbs in it. by common name instead of Latin name, because she said in the middle of the writing process, they changed rosemary from, rosmarinus to salvia or whatever.
Yes, I know.
Just
Exactly.
redonkulous. But all right. Well, thanks for sharing about linden. It's definitely one of my personal faves. It's cool to hear that's in Susan's top 5 nourishing herbal infusions. I saw you also wrote on your Instagram something about chickweed and how you want to incorporate it more in your regimen. So can you tell us about, like, say, chickweed infusion?
Yes, chickweed infusion. It's another really demulcent herb. It also is, really common. I think another nice thing about a lot of the nourishing herbs, the nourishing herbal infusions, is they tend to be common weeds. At least those are the ones that we like to promote the most.
Mhm.
And so weeds, plants that you can find right outside your back door, even if you're not going to harvest all that you would use. I mean, that is one thing, is that because we're using so much plant material to make an infusion, it would actually take a lot of time and energy and effort to harvest all of the herbs that you would need for a year-long daily infusion. But chickweed's actually really inexpensive to buy by the pound. And so that's one aspect of it. It also is really known to help kind of break up like fatty, cysty tissue.
Hmm.
It has a lot of saponins in it.
Hmm.
So like soap, like you picture soap breaking up oil.
Hmm.
That's kind of the same concept from my understanding.
Interesting.
And and then also just really high in minerals. So it's used a lot for, like breast cysts or just kind of any, as you get older, I'm in my mid 40s now, and I start finding all these like different little bumps and lumps that I never had before.
Oh,
I asked my mom. My mom's like, "Oh no, that's normal. Don't worry." I'm like, okay. Maybe that's TMI, but
no, I'm noticing the same thing for me. Yeah, every year goes by, I'm a little more creaky, and I'm trying to. Nourishing herbal infusions should help, though. I mean, I try to drink them at least. I don't drink them every day, just to be honest. I bet I drink them 4 days a week, 5 days a week, but I still figure that's way better than 0 days a week.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I also ebb and flow with it. It's really easy to kind of get out of habit.
Yeah.
So it's nice to like build the habit and then stick with it. But it's like the nourishment lasts.
Yeah.
Like even if you take a break from it, or if you fall out of the habit, or if life gets hectic, you still have the nourishment of the past ones, and then you can still easily kind of jump right back in.
That definitely reminds me of something Susan taught about. Like, you can't, once you receive a hug from someone, you can't take that away. So you can't take away that nourishment of the hug. And same thing with the infusion. And I said that my infusion today is kind of lighter in color. This is a nettle infusion for 2 reasons. So I only did an hour infusion today because I forgot to do it last night. And again, I was like, oh, I want to have my infusion with me for my interview with Brighid. So I figured that was better than nothing. Also, I noticed, so I got this from Mountain Rose Herbs, and it's interesting. Their European dried nettle infusion turns out way darker. And then this is the North American variety, and it's just lighter in color.
I have noticed that as well.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So that's why I've got kind of a, weak looking infusion here, but hey, I'm feeling it. And infusions are one of those things where when you start sipping on it, you could just immediately feel that vibrancy to it. So I definitely include it in my self-care regimen as often as I can. Did you want to speak a little bit to nettle as well?
Sure. Nettle is, I think, a favorite herb of many herbalists. And again, it is also a really common weed that grows prolifically, which is great because we are using such large amounts of it. We would only want to make infusions with herbs that we know grow prolifically or are farmed easily. And just really extremely high in minerals and vitamins, the full range. And because, if you take like a course, an anatomy and physiology course, you really start to realize how so many aspects and functions of the body are based in minerals. Like minerals are almost like the messenger. They also, I feel like they really help carry things in and out of the cells. And they also are really important to keeping our pH balance in the right place. And so as long as we're getting like a large amount of minerals and really good quality minerals and really complex minerals into our body, so many aspects of our health are going to improve. So I really think of stinging nettle in my mind, and I hope it becomes more and more in other herbalists' mind as well, as one of the North American adaptogens. You're not necessarily going to see it in a lot of these books that are based on adaptogens, and because a lot of adaptogens were studied in Asia or in Russia. And but we have to think that there must be some really common North American weeds that also have adaptogenic abilities on our body, which basically means that it helps to bring the body back to a more harmonized state, and makes us more adaptable to stress and change. It makes us more resilient to changes in our environment, which are really showing to be very drastic these days. Changes in our life, which there always are, and to really help us not always be in that fight or flight mode, to kind of take us out of that parasympathetic stress state and bring us back into the rest and digest state.
I love that.
Right. I always get those confused. I'm pretty sure the parasympathetic is the stressed and the sympathetic is the rest and digest, but those might be reversed. I don't know.
Yeah.
But basically,
I want to say sympathetic might be fight or flight.
Okay. There we go. Thank you. Okay.
We'll Google it afterwards, but
yeah, whatever that is.
Exactly. I like the idea of nettle as a adaptogen. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that before. Is that kind of a theory or an idea that you formulated yourself, or did you kind of learn that from somewhere else?
Well, Susan Weed tuned me into that originally. I've also had conversations with Katia Swift. I don't know if she would like specifically say that, but I have talked with her about it. I've kind of bounced the ideas off of people, but I mean, Susan really kind of suggests that most of the nourishing herbal infusions could be considered North American adaptogens, but
I like it.
Yeah.
How about like say the nettle seed or the nettle root? Do you have any experience working with those?
I don't actually.
So we're primarily talking about the leaves here then.
Yes, leaves and stem.
Awesome.
You can use the stem too, but yeah, the leaves.
Awesome. Well, I did want to ask you about one more plant, unless there was anything else you wanted to say about nettle.
Well, I guess that really great anti-inflammatory, and it's really shown to help with people who are dealing with type 2 diabetes, which is kind of a a lot of research being done in that realm. So to help lower blood glucose levels. So
awesome.
It's
exciting.
Yeah.
You also seem to have somewhat of a fascination with schisandra. That's how I pronounce it. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but and that was one of the plants you talked about in the nourishing herbal infusions module that you taught for HerbRally. First of all, I guess, would you consider that a nourishing herbal infusion per se? Because I usually, again, like kind of think of these like leafy, like less intense tasting plants. But yeah, would you consider schisandra a strong schisandra tea and nourishing herbal infusion? And also if you could talk a little bit about, say, the medicinal benefits and why you like it so much.
Yeah. I say schisandra, but schisandra, you say potato,
tomato.
I say tomato. It is a true adaptogen, and it works as a tea or a nourishing infusion. So a tea, to kind of delineate the two, a tea would be a small amount of plant material steeped for a short amount of time. Generally, we make teas with like really, plants, aromatic leaves, right? And then and maybe aromatic seeds. And then there are plants that have, oh, sorry, my cat
Hi, Kitty.
wants to join in the conversation.
That's awesome. That happens to me all the time.
Yes, I know. They're always so curious.
Yeah.
So, and generally with hard, roots and berries and seeds, we would make a decoction. So we would simmer the plant material to really get what we need out of it, because it takes a little bit more to break down that harder, tougher cellulose or plant structure.
Right.
And so the infusion would be, and so generally a schisandra berry, I would maybe do a decoction versus just a tea. So I would simmer it. The infusion, because it kind of is you can kind of get away with doing infusions instead of decoctions for things that are tough, like roots and berries, because you're using really hot water, and then you're using a large amount of plant material, and you're putting it in really hot water, and then you're clamping down and tightening that jar lid, usually a mason jar. Mm-hmm. And that, in a sense, like that compression also kind of steam cooks. It's almost like a little pressure cooker, not quite like a pressure cooker, but it really helps to kind of keep that heat for a long time and really kind of cook down the plant material, which is what we need if we're going to extract the vitamins and minerals anyway from the plants. So I think doing a nourishing herbal infusion with the schisandra helps to extract the medicinal properties. And it does taste really strong, but it's good. It's not like schisandra has a lot of volatile oils in it. It doesn't necessarily smell really strongly. It just like has a lot of strong flavor to it. The reason we don't make nourishing herbal infusions with plants that have a lot of volatile oils to them is because those volatile oils become concentrated. And then they're actually really hard for our kidneys and livers to deal with. We have to eliminate them, just like essential oils are really challenging for our kidneys and livers to deal with on the long term.
Yeah.
So if we were to concentrate them and then drink large amounts of them, it can challenge our metabolism and detoxification pathways. So I think that schisandra does have minerals and nutrients in it, being that it is a fruit and a berry. But it really also has, and it's not a stimulant, so we can make large amounts of it. It's an adaptogen, even though some people might say, again, this is another interesting point of debate, I feel, in the herbalist community, where people talk about stimulant and sedative adaptogens. Mm-hmm. But from my understanding, an adaptogen is by definition not stimulating or sedating, it's modulating. And so I think that maybe we feel like it's stimulating just because it builds energy, like the nettle. Nettle's not necessarily a stimulant herb, but it builds our nutrition levels, and it helps to our body to be more energized. And I think that there is a difference there. And so schisandra especially is very helpful in, us building all of our different energy reserves, and also allowing us to be more adaptable and resilient in faces of stress and change and hardships. But she also has a little a spice to her, a spicy personality or plantinality or whatever you want to call it. She just, I did a podcast episode about schisandra recently. So listen to the podcast episode and you'll hear all about it. But at the end of it, I gave a little story about my other connection with schisandra, is how she's kind of like, during some of my party days, she was my alter ego. And I would, when I'd really break loose and set free, I would really kind of embody Schisandra's energy. I feel like I might have also had a red wig that I put on.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, I just want to plug your podcast. In fact, I was going to ask you about it during the show, so that's a nice segue into that. Thanks for sharing about schisandra. It's definitely one of my personal faves as well. I haven't had it in quite some time. You know, when I worked at Mountain Rose Herbs, it was really easy to get my hands on the herbs all the time at a really great price, and so that's one of those ones I have to be intentional about and going out and maybe purchasing at the local herb shop around here. But awesome. Well, yeah. So let's talk about the Healthy Herb podcast with host Brighid Doherty. You do a lot of these like individual plant profiles, I want to say, and you do some interviews. I was on the show quasi recently. So why don't you tell the audience about your show? What was the inspiration for it? And yeah, what kind of format you got going on over there?
Yeah, well, the Healthy Herb podcast, I think I'm up into the 80s as far as episode numbers.
Nice.
And each episode, is probably around 45 minutes to an hour. So there's really like close to 80 hours of free herbal content out there for people to go through. And I've taken some breaks from it. For the first year that I did it, I really committed to doing an episode a week for a year. And I pretty much stuck with that. And then I think I'm now in my third year of it maybe. And so I've kind of, life gets full and podcasts take a lot of time and energy and effort. So I have kind of stepped back a little bit, but it is still something that I am continuing to do. I'm just not as frequent with it. And I really do need to put an episode out there soon. I have my thought of what it's going to be, but I haven't quite you just got to make yourself sit down and break out the microphone and sometimes just do it. Sometimes like thinking about it becomes more daunting and overwhelming. You just got to go for it. What do they say? Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. Or just getting it done.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. I literally used that quote yesterday.
Oh yeah.
With my daughter. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yep. But it started ironically. I mean, I think that, so it's a network found me. I guess they probably found me on Instagram. You never know what doorways Instagram can open, really.
Sure.
Or just putting yourself out there can open. But I got an email one day and it was just like, start a podcast. And it was something that I always had in the back of my mind because I love podcasts. I listen to them so much while I work. Gardening or painting houses, it's intriguing to me. And I feel like I have a lot to say. So I did an interview with them and it was the Believe Network, which is ironically a sports podcast network based in LA.
That's hilarious.
You go to their website, it's like almost all sports. But they wanted to branch out. They have like hundreds of podcasts and they wanted to branch out and do kind of like a health and nutrition aspect. Cause I guess people that are into sports are probably also into health and nutrition.
Interesting.
And yeah, they just reached out and I said, sure. And so, which is really nice because normally if you create your own podcast, you have to pay for the space that it takes and like the memory space, and you have to pay for the distribution of it. And so they take care of that for me, cool. Which is really nice. The downside is that they also do some advertising, which they have, it makes sense for them since they're paying for it. I feel like I have to also, I get a certain percentage of the advertising. It's really it's very not much because I don't have a huge listener audience, which is really what you need if you're going to make money on advertising.
Right.
But I want them to at least make money so that they keep me around so that I don't have to pay. I mean, the benefit to me is that I don't have to pay a couple $100s a year or whatever it is. And that it's out there. So, and they have pretty good analytics that you can see to see how things are moving on it. So they just reached out to me and they wanted a 1-year commitment of a weekly podcast. So it really got me to commit and do it. And they set me up taught me how to use GarageBand on my computer and what mic to get and, just the basics, how to work the sound and how to edit. So it was free instruction and a free distribution.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Motivation too.
Right. Yeah. Now you're accountable to them.
Yeah, right. I need to be accountable to someone, because sometimes if I'm only accountable to myself, it doesn't really happen.
I get it.
Yeah. So, but the whole idea is I want herbal medicine to be as common in the everyday household as cooking a healthy meal. And so I really want to promote education around working with really common plants that grow all around us or are inexpensive and easy to buy. And I do like doing the one plant profile because I am a simpler. So I really like focusing in on the really depths, because I like learning about plants in depth too, and the folklore and the history and etymology and just all the different ways that one plant can help our health. And so a lot of them are single herb episodes, but then also I do have, top 5 herbs for digestion, which I think is one of my top 10, episodes, things like that too. So
I love that. Yeah, fascinating. I have listened to a Portland Trailblazers podcast on the Believe network. And I noticed that that's what you had as well. And I was like, that's interesting. Yeah, there's a sports podcast, and then
yeah,
Bridget's on the same one. That's
right.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, you said something about having an herbalist in every home, something to that effect. And I saw on your website, herbal medicine is the people's medicine. I know that's a common saying in the herbal community, and I was just hoping you could kind of speak to what that means to you, herbal medicine as the people's medicine.
Well, it's, medicine, current modern days, scientific tradition medicine has a lot of gateways that you have to go through to actually have access to healthcare. It's very expensive. You generally need to have insurance if you want extra care. You generally need to have a primary doctor that then can refer you to another doctor that then might refer you to another doctor. You have to go through all the tests. Like, you're really kind of beholden to the system, the insurance company, and there is places for that. But to go into that system, you really have to be very strong and grounded and not easily frightened, because it is a very scary, it is a health tradition that is based on fear. And it's not even a health tradition. It's a medical tradition. It's a tradition that doesn't really focus on health. It focuses on diseases and how to stop them, I guess. And so when I think about people's medicine, like, that's kind of like a doctor's medicine. But people's medicine is when we can take our health into our own hands and we don't rely on an authoritarian figure to tell us what to do and to give us a prescription that then we have to go to a pharmacy to get filled, and we don't even know what it is or how it's made or any of that. So when we talk about herbal medicine as people's medicine, it's we understand our body. We understand that we are each unique individuals, and that we can tune in with the needs of our body. And maybe we do need a pharmaceutical, but we can tune in with those needs. But then also we can also go and take care of our own health by working with the plants. And in doing that, we don't need a prescription. We don't need someone to tell us, like, yes, you can take this, or no, you can't take this. We don't need insurance. We are guided by someone who has more experience than we do, an herbalist, or we gain our own experience. We gain our own information. Information is out there for sure. And that's what I like to do, is put more information out there. And that we can easily make home remedies that are actually very effective and can really help a lot of definitely minor complaints, but also some very chronic conditions that the medical system hasn't quite figured out how to help. And that we can just be more self-empowered and rely on ourselves and nature for our health and well-being than insurance companies and doctors. Although there is a place for all of that. I don't want to like totally deny all of that, but let's start in our backyard first and see what we can do there and use that just for really extreme health situations and emergencies.
Here. Well said. Yeah, and it's always funny to me, like, and I'm sure this is kind of common in the herbal community as well, but being called alternative medicine when it's actually like the OG human medicine. You'd think, like, say, modern medicine might be the more alternative, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, modern medicine definitely has its place. We're definitely better off for it. But yeah, why not have an herbalist in every home? And I love that that's your mission, and you're constantly, putting out free content. You also do have a school. It's called the Solidago School of Herbalism. Solidago is, I want to say, the genus for goldenrod. And I was hoping you could tell our audience, why did you choose that plant as your, your logo and whatnot?
Well, it grows in abundant in my backyard and on this island. It is talk about an abundant native medicinal weed plant. It's also a really beneficial for the pollinators. So Solidago, the botanical name, the genus actually means to make whole. Solid ago. Ago is to make and solid is whole. And so I loved that. I love entomology. And so I really loved that name because I think that is what we seek to do with herbalism and holistic health care. And I think goldenrod is named that because it can help heal wounds because it's so astringent. And so it helps to make tissue whole again. But so I love that about it. I also love that it's a very misunderstood plant. Often a lot of people assume that it causes these fall seasonal hay fever allergies, pollen allergies when because it's so blooming so brightly when everyone's sneezing. Oh, it must be that field that's full of goldenrod that's making me sneeze and giving me inflamed eyes and histamine reactions. But really it's not because it's a pollinator plant. It's not wind pollinated. So the pollen is sticky and is not air in the air.
Oh,
it's only in the plant. So you're not breathing in goldenrod pollen. The plants are, the bees are flying around with it stuck to their legs. That's why it's so bright and yellow, right? The pollinator plants have to really put on their best dress to attract their sexual helpers, like their lingerie.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they need to draw in those pollinators. And so the wind pollinated plants don't need to put all that effort into being bright and showy for the pollinators. So they aren't bright and showy for us either. We don't see the ragweed, ambrosia is the botanical name for ragweed. And we don't necessarily see the mugwort, the artemisias, when they're in bloom, because they don't have to have bright showy blooms. They're very nondescript. They're white. They're very small, but they release a ton of pollen into the air that blows all around in the wind. And the pollen is designed like little torture devices so that it can grip on, has all these barbs and hooks so it can grip on to the next plant it comes in contact with. And so those hooks and barbs grab onto our sinuses and can irritate them as well. So the fact that back to goldenrod, the fact that is so misunderstood, I feel like in a lot of ways, herbalism has been quite misunderstood, at least for the past 100 years or 200 years. And I think maybe more and more it's being understood, but I think it's kind of a nice emblem for herbalism as well. And yeah, just that it's a very common native weed that maybe I think it's becoming more and more popular and understood that it's a herbal remedy. The irony, of course, one of the best things that goldenrod is great for is its antihistamine properties and its ability to decongest and to relieve allergy symptoms.
That is ironic. Yeah, I never really noticed it when I lived in Oregon, but yeah, it's literally growing in my backyard right now. It's not in bloom yet, but we saw it last summer or late summer, I want to say. And Yes, it's an exciting plant for me to see. It's going to be fun for me to develop a relationship with it more and more. Do you want to go into more like what your school is all about and everything? Let's talk about the Solidago School of Herbalism. What do you all do over there? Yeah,
I'm trying to figure out what my school's all about too these days. Ironically, I'm kind of in a, I think of life as waves or breaths. We take a big deep inhale and then a big exhale, and I kind of feel like I'm on an inhale right now, or like the intake of the wave before the big next crash.
Sure.
So it's had a variety of different things that I've done with under the guise of Solidago Herb School, probably 5 or 6 years ago when my daughter was a toddler. I decided I wanted to try to figure out if I could have a career, some sort of a career path with herbalism, and teaching seemed like my best route, my favorite route, what I've always been called to do. And so I started out just doing a lot of local classes and workshops. It's a very small community. So, there's not, you have to branch out further than that, I think, to actually be supported financially in doing that, or bring people to me. And I had thought about maybe doing more kind of retreats because I live in such a beautiful place, but that just was too full on for when having a small child. So started out with local workshops. And then when COVID hit, I went more like a lot of people into online classes. And I did teach an online course called Nourish Yourself, which was all about nourishing herbal infusions. And that's still there. It's an evergreen course, but quite honestly, I would prefer people take the course that I developed for HerbRally because I think it's better. Yeah. It's like the next level. I think I did a better job for it. So I would refer people to that course and to you. I know I'm such a good saleswoman.
You're the best.
I really like the course that I developed for your program, and that's so. And then I ended up writing a book called Drinkable Healing Herbal Infusions, which was also a publishing company randomly emailed me. I'm pretty sure they found me on Instagram because because I use a lot of hashtags herbal infusions. And they wanted someone to write a book about herbal infusions because it was kind of this publishing company would base all of their analytics, would do analytics and then base books on what they found people were searching for online. And apparently people are searching a lot about nourishing infusions or herbal infusions. And so they found me. So I wrote a book, I did the podcast. I was like, okay, I've done all these things. And so now I'm kind of figuring out, I've taught local classes, I've taught online classes. I'm a landscape gardener. So I'm just trying to think about what the next phase of Solidago Herb School is. I'm kind of in this holding pattern. Lately I've been thinking, I think it would be so awesome to do like a mother-child apprenticeship where cool. I would be because I love seeing how interested my daughter is in herbalism and other kids. And I'm really enjoying working with kids and even teenagers right now. And so I think that to have like other mothers and their children come for like a week long hang on Deer Isle and learn about the herbs and do projects and make remedies and learn about our bodies and health, but in like a fun, lighthearted way, where the kids could commune and the parents could commune, and we could all commune with plants. So that's that. And I would love to also maybe I'm thinking about the next book that I want to write that's like my own book and not a publisher's book. So the book that I wrote was basically, I got an outline and I just fill in the blanks. This is what we want you to write. Pick 15 herbs. Right. These are the categories. make a bunch of 100 recipes with your 15 herbs. That was a challenge unto itself.
I bet.
So now I saw the whole process and how books are made. I thought that was a great learning experience. And now I'm thinking, well, I want to do something that's a little bit more creative, a little bit more artistic. So yeah, I'm kind of in a inhale
Like that.
and we'll see what the next exhale produces.
Just out of curiosity, do you know what your next book would be about?
I would love, well, it'll be about herbs.
Okay. Yeah.
I want it to be like a workbook.
Cool.
That where people could actually interact with the book, where they could, make notes and take it out into the field with them. And I want it to be like have bent paper and handwriting notes. And I want people to really, use it. So some sort of a workbook journal, whether it's one that would be maybe for homeschoolers or one that would be for people like me, or for people that just want to learn their backyard herbs and how to work with them. But I would like to put some of my own art into it as well. And I don't know.
I love it. Well, I also really like your idea for your retreat, your mom and kiddo herbal class. That would be a lot of fun. I don't think I've seen that before. So what a cool idea. I think I had you on the schedule till like 11:15. Do you got a few more minutes?
I do. Yeah.
Awesome. I do want to actually, first of all, your school. So is it Solidago School of Herbalism.com?
SolidagoHerbSchool.com.
Herb School. Okay. And the links for the listener and the viewer, that'll be in the show notes. So we'll get it right there for sure. So before we kind of, do the last couple questions, I did want to have you briefly touch on this quote that I saw on your Instagram page, and I really liked it. It's kind of long, so bear with me here. I'll just read it for you. And then, I was just hoping you could kind of talk about it. It's just very personally interesting to me. And it's not even necessarily herbalism per se, but it's probably peripherally related. So you say, sacred space. Sometimes I feel like a hurricane that spirals through life in my house, leaving messes and projects, both finished and unfinished, in my wake. Sometimes I'm only looking where I'm going next and not where where I was. I am grateful when I force myself to stop and regroup my mind, my space, my relationship, and my projects. And then you said something about this. I think this was maybe during the wintertime, so I'll just skip that part. And then you said, how can I create sacred space so that I can create? What creative womb space will I be growing in this winter? Does this resonate with you? Let me know in the comments. But I was just hoping you could talk about sacred space. And I feel like Amanda and I do a pretty good job about creating that here. And a lot of times we'll, just be rushing around. And then, you just sit back and actually enjoy the fruits of your labor, the beautiful space that you created. And it just helps keep me present. And I'm so appreciative. So I was just kind of curious if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. That's an interesting quote. I wrote that. Wow. Okay.
You're great. I told you, listener, you got to go check out Brighid's Instagram page.
I think, it's kind of like what I'm talking about right now. It kind of really resonates with exactly what I said. It's like, I can be so like, go, go, go. And that was on the broad scale of life, what I was just talking about, like, oh, the school, the workshops, the courses, the articles, the books, the podcasts. And then it's like, okay, inhale and hold. And it's like that hold, that inhale, and then that hold where it's like peace and calm and tranquility. And I think that that is important when there's always so much output to also like come back in. It's like the breath or the heart, the rhythm of life, the ocean waves, I think a lot about, and finding that space in between. And so I think when I think of sacred space, it's not necessarily like physical as so much as it is internal, and just like a time to ground out and center and figure out like what's the next step. And when that quote was probably entering into a winter time, which is when I think of as a time of kind of retreat and reflection and stillness. And, what can we find in that stillness that will allow us to expand back out into the next breath, or the next time or the next space. And I took a yoga class once, and it was such a memorable moment when the teacher, Charlotte Clues, said, she's like, we were entering into the winter, and she's like, what are you going to bring into your winter cave? What are you going to bring in there so that you can work with that? And I think it was more like a thought. It wasn't necessarily, it could be something physical. You could be like a book, writing a book, or, but it could also just be what thoughts or what mindset are you going to bring into that winter cave, or that womb, that center of creativity or creation? What's going to dwell there so that you can release the next birth of your own life, or the next project, or the next reality?
I love it. Yeah, I guess that was an appropriate question, because I didn't anticipate you talking about the in breath and the out breath, and the inhale and exhale. So awesome. Well, thanks for your writing, and it sounds like you have had quite a bit of opportunity come to you from your Instagram page. So that's pretty neat. Why don't we wrap up with a question we've been doing for a lot of these episodes? What keeps you learning and growing in the field of herbalism?
Oh, definitely the love of the plants. And just, there's always more to learn. You can always go deeper. I love the quote, you can either go a mile wide and an inch deep, or an inch wide and a mile deep. And I kind of like doing both of those things, but it takes time to do both of those things. Can we go a mile deep and a mile wide?
Yeah, I like that. Why either or?
Yeah, but it takes a while. It takes a lot, and it's just a never ending exploration and connection to life and nature and the cosmos.
Amen.
Yeah.
You like your quotes. And one thing I notice about herbalists too, I feel like a lot of us really like etymology, and you brought that up a couple of times. So yeah, very cool. Well, I just want to say thanks, Brighid, for your time today. Also, huge thanks for your, spending all of that time creating the Nourishing Herbal Infusions course. Really means a lot to me and the HerbRally community. That's hilarious that you're like recommending that over your own. But no, dear listener, go support Brighid and her work. Check out solidagoherbschool.com. Of course, hit her up on Instagram and subscribe to the Healthy Herb podcast. I want to say I might even be your last episode on there. I think I looked
if you want to hear Mason and I continue our conversation, but with more of Mason's perspective, check it out for sure. It was a fun interview.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it as well. So with that, we'll wrap up, and thanks to you all for listening, and thanks, Brighid, for joining us on the Herbalist Hour.
Thanks so much, Mason.
Very good. We'll talk to you soon. All right.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Take care.